This is a bonus episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. It is the evening of Wednesday, September 13th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday through the week, and then bonus episodes such as this one as needed. If you're a Jets fan, you know that Aaron Rodgers is officially out for the season. The word came out yesterday that he suffered a torn Achilles tendon in the first quarter of the season opener against the Buffalo Bills on Monday night. So Zach Wilson, at least for the time being, is in the starting lineup. And some reports that have come out over the last 2 days have suggested that the Jets are going to stick with Zach Wilson, or at least that's the plan right now. And what I'm about to tell you, I'm sure is not a popular opinion in some areas of the fan base, but I think if you look at the alternatives to Zach Wilson, he's the best option the Jets have right now at quarterback, and he probably will be the best option the Jets have at quarterback for the rest of the season. Now, I think that the Jets need to leave no stone unturned when looking for another quarterback. I don't think the Jets should be satisfied with Zach Wilson being their best option, but I think if we're being realistic about what's actually going to be available for this team, I don't think that there's going to be a better option than Zach Wilson. I wrote an article today on GangGreenNation.com, and I went through some of the categories of players who have been speculated at the quarterback position to be potential targets for the Jets. And I think far and away the most likely category are players who are free agents right now. And I listed a couple of guys. I mean, there's Carson Wentz, former member of the Eagles, the Colts, the Commanders. There's Nick Foles, who's been around the NFL and actually won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles 6 years ago. There's Colt McCoy, a veteran who's kind of bounced around the NFL. There's Brett Rippon, the guy who's played with the Broncos. He's actually started a couple of games against the Jets for the Denver Broncos. There are a couple other guys out there, some names that are being thrown around like Chad Henne. These names are not inspiring names, but these are the guys who are actually available right now. And I don't think any of these players is necessarily better than Zach Wilson. I mean, I don't even think Carson Wentz. It's kind of amazing how far Carson Wentz has fallen from grace. In his second season in the NFL, he was a leading MVP candidate for most of the year before he got injured, and then Nick Foles took over for him and helped the Eagles win the Super Bowl. Wentz has essentially been booted out of 3 different teams in the last 3 years. I mean, there's essentially 3 straight teams have said at the end of the season, we don't want you around anymore. And his production has really fallen off. I mean, there's a year against the year with the Colts 2 years ago where if you look at the statistics, he's okay. But when you factor in the fact he was handing the ball to Jonathan Taylor, it could not even average 7 yards per passing attempt. Really not that great of a season in context. You want to talk Nick Foles. We know he led the Eagles to a Super Bowl, but that was a long time ago. He was a much younger quarterback. That was a team that, had a lot of pieces like the Jets do. They had a good defense. They had some skill players who were pretty solid. They had a good supporting cast on offense. But that was a long time ago, and Nick Foles did not have to carry a team through the entire season. And then you have other guys who are more limited, like McCoy and Rippon, who, maybe you can get through a game with a very limited playbook, but their physical limitations are going to show up. A Chad Henne who's been linked to the Jets, not really that great of an option. A guy who's, got 2 Super Bowl rings as Patrick Mahomes' backup, but when he's had to play through his career, he's a disappointing second-round pick with Miami. Went to Jacksonville, did not do a whole lot. Not a particularly stellar option. And these are the guys who are available right now. And there's a reason you're available as a quarterback in the NFL after the regular season has begun. This is a league where everybody wants more quarterbacks. Quarterback depth is the most valuable commodity you can have in this league. So if anybody's a halfway decent quarterback, I mean, there are some exceptions here or there, but odds are they're going to be on a team. And I know Zach Wilson's been very disappointing. And listen, I wish there was a better option than Zach Wilson right now, but I'm not sure there is for the New York Jets. Say what you will about Zach Wilson. I mean, I think there are degrees of shaky quarterback play. I think Zach Wilson's a cut above a Tim Boyle. I think he's a cut above a lot of the guys who are free agents right now. And he's young enough where at least there's some potential for him to get better. Now, how much better is that? I don't know, but we've seen the Jets have been able to win games with Zach Wilson at quarterback, even though he hasn't necessarily been the reason that they've won a lot of games, with a strong run game anchored by Breece Hall. And that was one of the stories that kind of got lost in everything that happened Monday night. Breece Hall, in only 10 carries, looked like Breece Hall again. So even if you have shaky run blocking, you've got a dynamic running back and a defense that looks as good as ever, that forced 4 turnovers of Josh Allen. the Jets are not going to ask a lot out of their quarterback this year, or they're at least not going to need to ask a lot out of their quarterback to win some games. And perhaps Zach Wilson's the number one option. Now, I know there are some other big names that have been linked with the New York Jets. As we continue on this special Wednesday night edition of Locked On Jets, I'm going to explain why a lot of them probably are not available, or at least not as available as people are speculating. That's ahead here on the second episode of Locked On Jets on this Wednesday. This special edition of Locked On Jets is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, each week we're going to provide you with players who are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins got 8 targets and put up 0 fantasy points in week 1 against the Browns' tough secondary, but he gets a big shot to rebound against the much weaker Ravens secondary at home. The Texans had success throwing outside to their wideouts, and Higgins has a history of massive volume versus Baltimore when healthy. Stick with Higgins in what should be a high-scoring affair as he makes quick amends opposite Jamar Chase. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. The same goes for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Jase Medical. Everybody should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. The Jase Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you'll have access to your medication in case of an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultations and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360. That's $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON, one word with no space, LOCKEDON, jasemedical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This is a special bonus Wednesday night edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. We're talking quarterbacks. The Jets are probably going to have to sign a quarterback in the next couple of days. Now, I expect Tim Boyle will be active on Sunday as the backup quarterback to Zach Wilson. But even if you're a believer in Zach Wilson, I don't think there are a lot of believers in Tim Boyle being one hit away from taking over as starting quarterback for the New York Jets. So even if Zach Wilson, as the Jets currently plan, is going to be the starting quarterback the rest of the season, they could certainly stand to upgrade. And in the first segment, I talked about how a lot of the players who are available are not really upgrades on Zach Wilson. And I think that that's true. I mean, I think even the big names like Carson Wentz, not really an upgrade. Nick Foles, I guess you could make an argument, but he's up there in age. And I think ultimately Zach Wilson at this point in time, unless something unexpected, is going to be the best option for the New York Jets. But the guys I mentioned, I think Wentz is an upgrade over Tim Boyle as the backup quarterback. And really that's what you're looking for right now. You're not going to replace Aaron Rodgers. We know that there's going to be a big downgrade from Zach Wilson, from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson, but you can upgrade the number 2 spot right now. Now, why can't the Jets do better than Zach Wilson? Well, you've heard names thrown around. I've heard Jameis Winston maybe from the New Orleans Saints. I've heard Andy Dalton from the Carolina Panthers. Now, I do think like a high-end backup quarterback, get Gardner Minshew with the Colts, another example of Case Keenum with the Texans. A number of names are being thrown out there. And I do think that a lot of those players would be upgrades on Zach Wilson. In fact, those guys are fit in what I refer to as like the high-end backup, decent spot starter, low-end actual starting quarterback category. And I think a team like the Jets are situations where those guys could actually thrive. The Jets are a situation where you don't need a ton out of your quarterback. So if you have a limited guy who can maybe do a little bit and you lean on the run game and you lean on the defense, you're in pretty good shape. Most teams where the quarterback's required to carry the load, those guys are not going to fit in well on. They're not going to have a lot of success. But a team like the Jets is a situation where those guys could have success. But here's the challenge right now. they're all on teams that have only played one game. I don't care who you are in this league. One game into the season, you got a shot. You have not fallen out of the playoff race. So how could another team look at the Jets and see that they lost their starting quarterback and say, you know what? The lesson here is I got to get rid of my quarterback depth. The Jets lost their starting quarterback. Therefore, we should not have a good backup. We should send our backup to the Jets. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, quarterback is the most valuable commodity in the NFL, and quarterback depth is extremely important. So I'm very skeptical that anybody's going to send a quality backup quarterback to the Jets. And I'll take it a step further. I've even heard rumors about Matthew Stafford from the Rams, who the Jets apparently inquired about back in the spring, when they weren't entirely sure they were going to be able to get Aaron Rodgers. Kirk Cousins with the Vikings, who has a history with the Jets back in 2018, turned them down in free agency. Those teams are still trying to win. So if you're not going to trade your backup quarterback, why would you trade your starting quarterback one game into the season? You pretty much just destroy your season. Go to your fan base. Sorry, guys, Jets needed our quarterback. We're not going to win this year. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Look, it would be great for the Jets if they could get a quality starting quarterback. They should certainly make the calls. Certainly, maybe somebody does something crazy. Wouldn't be the first time an NFL team did something kind of dumb, but it's not going to happen. Now, maybe we get later into the season. We'll see how Zach Wilson's doing. And if he's struggling in one of those high-end backups, maybe even one of those starters is available, it'll be a different conversation. That's if a team's falling out of the race. They know they're not bringing their quarterback back next year, or at least one of these quarterbacks. Maybe they say we can get a draft pick. That's a different story, but that'll depend on how Zach Wilson plays in a few weeks. Right now, I don't think it's an option. Right now, I think the Jets have to go with Zach Wilson. And I'll close out the show by making one other point. I don't know where this stuff came that Tom Brady's going to be an option for the Jets, but put that out of your mind. It makes zero sense. He's 46 years old. He's hated the Jets his entire career. I mean, that's well documented, his dislike for this franchise. He'd be letting down his biggest fans in New England who adore him for like one run with the Jets. And beyond that, if none of that convinces you, he's a part owner of a different team. He's a part owner of the Raiders, which means he can't play with the Jets. It's against the rules. So whoever came up with that, I mean, I think they're just trying to get clicks for a website or something, because that's just like the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. Tom Brady's not going to be the Jets quarterback. It's one thing I can tell you with a great deal of certainty. And I don't need insider information to provide that with you. For right now, it's going to be Zach Wilson. If things change, in a few weeks where Zach's playing poorly and somebody hits the open market, in potentially the trade market, then it could be a different story. But for right now, I think Zach Wilson's the best chance the Jets have. I know a lot of people won't like it, but he's just the best option there is. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a great option. You hope he improves. You hope he grows. You hope he turns this into a redemption story. That's how it is right now. But that's all for this bonus episode of Locked On Jets. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. If you're listening on a podcast source and like it, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with our crossover Thursday show with Marcus, the host of Locked On Cowboys.